Are you ready for Cyberpunk 2077's 2.0 update and the Phantom Liberty DLC? This is advice I've been giving since we first started to learn just how big of an overhaul the leveling and skill tree systems that we're getting in what we now know as the 2.0 patch for Cyberpunk. A nearly ground-up rebuilding of the character build mechanics and leading into the Phantom Liberty DLC. But now, CD Projekt Red themselves have said it. It is recommended to start a new playthrough when Cyberpunk's 2.0 update releases on September the 21st. Until this point, they've been kind of soft, a little wishy-washy on this advice, suggesting that the DLC can be engaged with on existing saves, you know, fresh players or players with 2,000 hours and that kind of stuff, so long as you've progressed the story to the point where you go to Pacifica. And while there will be a one-time free skill point respec option for people using existing saves, I have always considered it a much better plan, and indeed more fun, if you do a fresh playthrough and experience all of the new systems, all of the new skills, all of the new build progress in full, in the much more natural and immersive way, with a brand new playthrough from scratch. So you get to play the entire game with all these new systems instead of just a bit of the game in the middle or at the end with the new systems. Why wouldn't you start a new save file to get as much out of these new systems and new updates as you could? Due to the number of changes, they say, starting fresh will enhance your overall gameplay experience. Which is a, frankly, much more succinct way to say what I just said. What do you, my dear viewer, think of this? Are you prepared to start all over again? Are you excited to? Or are you lamenting this advice? Hello again, I am Blunty. And after unpacking this a little and the annoying challenge we're actually facing here, I also want to touch on just a few things you really should think about focusing on before you dive into the DLC. Oh, and I'll come back to this at the end of the video too, but no, the new patch is not going to set your CPU on fire or melt your PC or something crazy like that. I know that sounds stupid, but this is a thing people have been legitimately worried about because we live in a society. Now, personally, I'm very excited to start experiencing the 2.0 updates changes, which drops in about less than 24 hours from when this video goes up, actually. But I'm also pretty annoyed that CDPR took way too long to get it ready and have only left us with a scant 5 days between the 2.0 patch landing and the Phantom Liberty DLC launching. 5 days to get a fresh new replay of the game started and progressed. Now, understand, the DLC is not designed to be experienced with an end game build. In fact, it might be the worst idea to do it that way, as chances are you'll be a bit too OP and you'll wind up making the new content a bit less interesting because, well, you'll trivialize some of the combat and encounters and stuff, wouldn't you? And specifically, Phantom Liberty's content unlocks after you meet Placide and Mama Brigitte, and go through the quest lines around them and the Voodoo Boys and whatnot until after you speak to Alt. So you don't actually need to go nuts and no-life your way through the entirety of Cyberpunk 2077's base game in those 5 days, nor should that be your target, frankly, for reasons we just spoke about. Of course, the nature of Cyberpunk 2077 also means there's no easy answer to how long it'll take to get to Pacifica for you. You can beeline the main quests and sort of go straight there as quickly as possible. That's probably a bad plan. You're going to miss out on a lot of really fun game on the way to that. Or you can, of course, go nuts doing a crap load of side quests, but probably anywhere from, let's say, 10 to 20 hours of gameplay should do it pretty comfortably for most players. Get you to a good level and get you some decent equipment and get you deep enough into the skill tree to make it all feel really good when you get there. But if you do the math on that, it still works out to between 2 to 4 hours of Cyberpunk every single day between 2.0 and Phantom Liberty's release to nicely flow your game right into the DLC content as it drops. For me, that's easy peasy. For a lot of other gamers, yeah, maybe that's not so practical. There's also the issue of having to learn your way around a nearly completely new skill tree and underpinning mechanics. The more you look into this, the more you realize just how drastically things have changed for just general gameplay approaches and character builds. Alongside the new skill tree system, there's a completely overhauled cyberware system, utterly new way to build for armor, new weapon rebalances, new combat options, new move sets, even something as basic as how stamina and healing work have been changed right at their bones. Like, healing used to be just a consumable thing. You could spam heals as much as you like, but now apparently they're on a cooldown. And stamina, well, the stamina is completely different. It works completely differently depending on how you're engaging in combat. The stamina doesn't even burn when you sprint anymore, but it does burn in new ways. And it's just so many changes. So much to unlearn and relearn for these new systems, and then make a plan for a coherent new build underneath all that, because I'm long past doing generalized builds to this game. My last few playthroughs have been highly specialized builds, and let me tell you, it is a super fun way to play that way. So yeah, 5 days, even for someone with as much game time as I get to have, still feels pretty limiting. Now, of course, you don't have to start playing the new DLC as soon as it drops. You can just do a new playthrough at your own pace and get there when you get there. And let's face it, most of us are going to want to play it as soon as possible because, FOMO, or maybe you're concerned about spoilers. The longer you leave it, the higher the chances are you'll see something you don't want to see, and it might sort of affect your gameplay or sort of ruin a story point for you or something. Or, in my case, I'm really looking forward to streaming it over on Twitch, so I kind of have to be ready to start playing it when it drops. Anyway, whatever your approach, there's a few things I would strongly recommend focusing on when you do start your fresh new playthrough. First, make a plan for your build. Like, literally make some notes. Think about it. It doesn't have to be a highly detailed or mapped out in full. You don't have to go, well, by the time I get to level 7, I want to have this skill unlocked, and then I'm going to go through this skill tree, and then I need this weapon, I need to go here to get this car. And I mean, if you do want to do that, you totally can. CDPR even invites you to do this. They have an interactive web page with the whole skill tree exposed for you to literally plan out your build if you want. You can do the whole thing. You can look at every single skill. You can see how they're all tied together. You can start thinking about where you want to spend your points and when. It's really quite fantastic. But even if you don't go that sort of nuts with it, at least really have a think about if you want to go stealth or netrunner or close quarters shotty grenades or sneaky sniper or melee or something, because if you're someone who hasn't played since launch and the new update DLCs are bringing you back, please trust me on this, believe me, or believe anyone else in the comments that's going to tell you about this, when I say specialist builds are the crack in this game. You can get some amazing gameplay if you really specialize into a really specific gameplay style. And more than that, doing highly specific builds makes subsequent playthroughs even more interesting because you have to approach every different mission in a slightly different way than you did before. You have to think about it differently. That's a way more interesting way to play than just a generalized build. I'd also recommend doing a lot, if not all, of the fixer gigs, the NCPD scanner hustles, and all of that kind of stuff before moving on from an area, particularly when you're in the first chapter. Not only are they a great source of just cash and experience and street cred and gear and loot, and they also lead you towards areas and story pieces and lore and even some like special and rare and one-off loot you might miss otherwise. Apparently 2.0 has even more of this sort of hidden stuff, and little Easter eggs and bits and pieces built into it. So I do advise against just beelining directly through the main story. Now this is just generally good advice for this game, but also given there's a whole new set of vendors with spanking new gear in the new locations in the DLC, it is going to be pretty smart to come in banked up and ready to spend. With the new vehicle-based combat systems and vehicle-specific missions even, I'd also prioritize getting a fast, responsive car or bike. One more small benefit of 2.0 launching just before the DLC is at least modders will have a few days to find out which mods break, can they be fixed in time, which mods are made redundant, and which new ones we might want before the DLC hits and the hype train really explodes. So, I'd also recommend keeping an eye on Nexus mods to see what's going on there over the next week. Well, I mean, at least for us PC players, you can actually use fantastic mods. You console peeps can keep slumming it with your vanilla flavor gameplay. Still though, 2.0 is bringing with it a bunch of graphical updates, even for console peeps. And unfortunately for you guys on last-gen consoles, you're SOL on this one. Update 1.6 was the last update you got, so you won't be getting any of this new stuff until you upgrade your hardware. Which, a bit sad trombone, but good for everyone else that the game is not being held back anymore by last-gen hardware. Oh, which reminds me, fellow PC players, we're all going to have to spend a little time fiddling with the graphics settings again, so I guess plan for that. Because this new update and all these new changes and all these new graphical things are going to affect performance. How and which way? Well, we'll find out. Maybe it gets a little worse, maybe it gets a little better, maybe you can use options you couldn't use before. But CDPR did already signal that the multi-core CPU utilization has been vastly improved, so that's really nice. Unfortunately, they announced that in the dumbest way possible by warning players to make sure their CPU coolers are all bossed up, making tech-ignorant people legitimately panic that the new update will set their PC on fire, or some dumb shit like that. I'm not even kidding. Like, I'm not even being hyperbolic. I've seen multiple posts from people who saw this post from CDPR and started panicking that their laptop or whatever is going to burst into flames. No, that's not going to happen, all right? It's not. CPUs are designed to not let themselves overheat and burst into flames. They do this by slowing themselves down, so the advice to having a good cooler is still good advice, but that's always been good advice on a gaming PC. It's nothing new with this new update or anything. It was just a really, really, really dumb way for CDPR to tell people that they've made it so multi-threading on PC is actually fixed at long last, because that's been a limiting factor on Cyberpunk for, well, since launch. It caused so much panic, in fact, the CDPR lead programmer who originally posted about this had to post something of an addendum, an apology, promising people that Phantom Liberty will not, in fact, melt your PCs. What a dumbass. I mean, I'm sure he's very, very smart because, you know, he's the lead scene programmer for CD Projekt Red. He's probably quite smart, but what a dumbass. Anyway, let me know what you're thinking in the down below as usual, and thank you as always to the patrons scrolling away from over there. I am Blunty. Catch you next time.